In the final years of Britain's independent trucking legacy, before the market got swamped with Volvos, Scanias, and badge-engineered clones, one name stood stubbornly proud on UK roads. ERF, and the EC Series wasn't just another cab on wheels, it was the company's last big swing, their final battle cry. A truck built by Brits for British roads, with British drivers in mind. Not flashy, not foreign, and definitely not forgettable. This was the last proper lorry that still felt like ours. By the time the EC Series rolled out in the early 1990s, ERF had already weathered decades of competition, crises, and close calls, but they still had that underdog grit. They weren't trying to win Europe, they were trying to win the UK back. The EC wasn't about reinvention, it was about refinement. They took everything they'd learned from the E Series and modernized it for a new generation of hauliers. The result? A cab that was cleaner, smarter, and way more comfortable than anything ERF had offered before. And critically, still built in Sandbach. Visually, the EC didn't scream at you. It didn't need to. That wide, flat front, the chunky corners, the tight, no-nonsense stance. It looked like a lorry that knew its job and wasn't here to mess around. And for many drivers, that's what made it special. It didn't come draped in chrome or wrapped in futuristic lines. It looked and felt like a proper British workhorse. Practical, boxy, and built to be flogged across the M6 day and night. Inside, it was a different world compared to older ERFs. The EC brought in a cleaner, driver-focused dash, better insulation, better visibility. You had actual storage, actual space, the kind of cab you could live in, not just survive. For long-haul truckers used to rattling around in worn-out Foden or early Leyland interiors, stepping into an EC felt like a reward. Still simple, still industrial, but just enough comfort to take the edge off those brutal 12-hour shifts. And let's talk about what powered it. ERF famously didn't build their own engines. They sourced the best, and the EC Series came with some absolute brutes. Cummins N14S Perkins, Eagle Texas, Detroit Diesel S60s in later models, each one chosen for reliability, torque, and the ability to get thrashed up the side of a hill with a full load of bricks and not even blink. You didn't need 1,000 buttons to drive one. You needed boots, backbone, and a deep respect for diesel. That's it. The chassis, bulletproof. The handling, surprisingly sharp for something its size. These trucks were meant to hug British roads, not glide over endless continental motorways. Tight corners, narrow lanes, rough loading bays. This was their world. Fleet operators loved the ECs because they didn't break the bank and didn't break down. They were easy to fix, easy to run, and didn't need a tech support line to restart the electrics every week. Mechanics could work on them blindfolded. Drivers could bond with them, and that's rare these days. In yards across Britain, from Glasgow to Gloucester, you'd see rows of ECs lined up, ready to roll. They were everywhere. Tankers, curtain-siders, tippers. The EC wasn't just one thing. It was a versatile platform built to do it all. Owner-operators snapped them up because they were honest trucks, and big fleets kept them around because they earned their keep. You didn't need to replace them every 4 years. Some are still running today, hauling scrap, grain, or machinery almost 30 years on. But it wasn't just the performance that made the EC Series stand out. It was what it represented. By the mid to late 90s, Britain's truck manufacturing scene was shrinking fast. ERF was one of the last real names still flying the flag. Every EC on the road felt like a small rebellion against a foreign takeover, and drivers noticed. That badge on the grille wasn't just branding, it was identity, it was pride. The EC wasn't perfect. It wasn't built to win beauty contests or impress a boardroom in Germany. It had its quirks. The clutch could be stiff, the early gearboxes were clunky, and if you didn't treat the suspension with a bit of care, it would bounce like a pogo stick. But ask any driver who lived in one for a few years, and you'll get the same response. It never let me down. And in this game, that's all that really matters. By the late 90s, the ERF EC Series had carved out more than just a niche. It had become a symbol, a rolling statement that British-built trucks still had some fight left in them, but behind the scenes, things were shifting, slowly, quietly. In boardrooms and shareholder meetings, the tide was turning, and while ECs were still rolling strong across the country, the writing was starting to appear on the wall. The takeover didn't happen overnight. Man had been eyeing ERF for a while, and in 2000, they made it official. To most drivers, it didn't seem like much at first. Same trucks, same logo, same factories, right? But under the surface, everything began to change. The EC Series, which had always been built around independence, selecting its own engines, designing its own cabs, keeping things distinctly British, was now slowly being folded into the broader MAN system, and that meant less freedom, more conformity. But for a few years after the buyout, the EC Series still held on. In fact, the ECX model rolled out, acting like a final remix of everything that made the original EC great. It looked sharper, it felt more modern, the cab got a cleaner design, some man-influenced updates, and more creature comforts. But it still had the heart of the old truck. You could spec it with a Cummins engine. You could still wrench it in your yard without calling a dealership. And most importantly, it still had that unmistakable ERF vibe. Strong, simple, and ready to get dirty. Out on the roads, ECs were still everywhere. They dominated local haulage fleets, shunted trailers in and out of ports, and hauled milk tankers down single-lane farm roads. You'd still see them packed into truck stops off the M62, parked up next to Scanias and DAFs, holding their own. Drivers still rated them, and owners still refused to let them go. Even as man-badged models started creeping in, there was something about the EC that just felt right. That sense of rightness came from how honest the truck was. There were no gimmicks, no pretending to be something it wasn't. It was straightforward. You got in, you turned the key, and you worked. There were no flashing screens or automatic gearboxes to make you feel like a passenger in your own lorry. You had to drive it. You had to feel the gears, know the revs, listen to the engine, and if something went wrong, chances are you already knew what it was before you even pulled over. For a generation of British truckers, the EC Series was the last truck they truly connected with, before the fleets got flooded with imports, before everything turned digital, before truck cabs started looking like cockpits. The EC was the final breath of the analog era, built with bolts instead of software. And in an industry that's constantly obsessed with moving forward, sometimes the best machines are the ones that don't. Even today, in 2025, you'll still catch glimpses of old ECs, usually out in the countryside or tucked away in a smaller firm's lot, covered in dust, still starting up every morning, still moving pallets or fencing or gravel like it's 1997. They're not pretty anymore. The paint's faded, the logos are scratched, the odometer's rolled over who knows how many times. But they're still doing what they were made to do, work. There's a quiet dignity in that, a kind of respect that doesn't come from flashiness or horsepower stats. It comes from surviving, from outlasting the noise, from showing up year after year when everything else around it changes. And that's what makes the EC Series more than just a lorry. It's a time capsule, a snapshot of when British trucks still had a heartbeat that was entirely their own. These weren't trucks built for global markets. They were built for the UK, built to handle British roads, British weather, and British operators who wanted a truck that was built tough, worked hard, and didn't complain. The EC delivered that, and then some. So if you ever find yourself behind one on a back road, rusty, rumbling, trailing a cloud of black smoke, give it a second look. You're not just seeing a lorry, you're seeing the end of an era, and maybe, just maybe, the last great one we built ourselves. Let me know when you're ready for the next one.